Roger, 0G, and I feel fine. Capsule is turning around.
On February 20th, 1962, the United States launched its first manned orbital mission. Mercury-Atlas 6 carried 40-year-old Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel John Glenn and his spacecraft Friendship 7 on one of the most important voyages in the nation's history. Although it had been almost a year since the Soviet Union put the first man in orbit, Glenn's three-orbit mission was a massive success that boosted the American people's confidence in their space program. Glenn instantly became a national hero, and his fame and political potential set him up for a decades-long career as a public servant. 60 years later, when people think of the space race, they think of an all-American boy in a silver spacesuit. But what if Mercury-Atlas 6 had failed? NASA's first two manned spaceflights utilized the Mercury-Redstone launch vehicle, a man-rated derivative of the U.S. Army's Redstone ballistic missile. However, it was not powerful enough to carry a man into orbit. NASA's solution was to use a modified U.S. Air Force Atlas missile. But there was a problem. The Atlas had an annoying habit of blowing up. Between June 11, 1957 and February 16, 1962, the Atlas rocket launched 116 times. 65 were successes, 40 were failures, and 11 were partial failures, for a success rate of 56%. Of the 19 that attempted to reach orbit, only 6 successfully did. That's a success rate of only 31.6%. The Atlas rocket's first space launch put the world's first communications satellite into orbit, SCORE, or Signal Communications by Orbital Relay Equipment. Looking at the Mercury-Atlas launch vehicle, the man-rated Atlas D used in Project Mercury, 3 were successful and 2 were not, for a success rate of 60%. While NASA was planning for Glenn's historic flight, military planners at the Pentagon were figuring out how to remove Cuba's communist government from power. In November 1961, in response to the botched Bay of Pigs invasion that April, the Kennedy administration officially authorized the implementation of Operation Mongoose, a campaign of covert operations and terrorist attacks to be carried out by the Central Intelligence Agency against the island nation of Cuba to remove Prime Minister Fidel Castro. In 1997, nearly 2,000 pages of top-secret Army records were declassified. These documents, dated from 1962 and 1963, were from the files of Joseph Califano, former Army General Counsel and Special Assistant to the Secretary of the Army. One specific report, titled Possible Actions to Provoke, Harass, or Disrupt Cuba, outlined numerous proposals to do, well, just that: provoke, harass, and disrupt Cuba's government and military. Number 7, coincidentally, was Operation Dirty Trick. Its objective was, quote, to provide irrevocable proof that should the Mercury manned orbit flight fail, the fault lies with the communists at Cuba, unquote. How would this be achieved? By, quote, manufacturing various pieces of evidence which would prove electronic interference on the part of the Cubans, unquote. Directly above Operation Dirty Trick in this memo is Operation Cover-Up, in which the CIA would, quote, convince the Communist government of Cuba that naval forces ostensibly assigned to the Mercury project is merely a cover, unquote. It notes that what this cover is should be left to speculation, and that this proposal could tie in with Operation Dirty Trick. Some of the proposals in this document are better known than Dirty Trick and Cover-Up. Operation Free Ride called for the airdropping of one-way airline tickets for Latin American cities such as Mexico City in Mexico and Caracas in Venezuela to stir a mass exodus from Cuba. Operation Good Times is probably the best known, so I'll just read it out loud. Quote, objective: to disillusion the Cuban population with Castro image by distribution of fake photographic material. Concept: prepare a desired photograph, such as an obese Castro with 2 beauties in any situation desired, ostensibly within a room in the Castro residence, lavishly furnished, and a table brimming over with the most delectable Cuban food, with an underlying caption, appropriately Cuban, such as, quote, my ration is different, unquote. Fortunately for NASA and the United States, Mercury-Atlas 6 was a success, and no plans like Operation Dirty Trick were ever proposed again. The Cold War nearly turned hot in October 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis, and Operation Mongoose was phased out by early 1963.
This Friendship 7, a real fireball outside.
I do want to point out a major problem that occurred during Glenn's flight. A faulty switch indicated the capsule's heat shield and landing bag came loose. The heat shield protected the spacecraft during re-entry, while the landing bag absorbed the shock of splashdown. If this was the case, only the straps of the retro pack, the solid rocket motors that slowed the capsule for re-entry, held the heat shield in place, and if these straps came loose, Glenn and Friendship 7 would be lost during re-entry. Normally, the retro pack would be jettisoned after retrofire, but Mission Control ordered Glenn to retain it just in case. As he hurled through the upper layers of Earth's atmosphere, he watched chunks of something fly past his window. He feared it was his heat shield, but it was just the retro pack, which was not designed to withstand re-entry. John Glenn served in the U.S. Senate from the state of Ohio from 1974 to 1999, and returned to space as payload specialist on Space Shuttle Discovery during STS-95 in 1998. At 77 years old, he remains the oldest person to ever orbit the Earth. Glenn was the last surviving member of the Mercury-7 and the oldest living American astronaut before his passing on December 8, 2016, at the age of 95. Although none of Operation Mongoose's plans were ever adopted, had Glenn's mission failed, can we be positive extreme measures would not have been taken to place the blame on the big, bad enemy as the country mourned the loss of one of its best and brightest? Fortunately, we will never know. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something new today. As always, my Operation Dirty Trick article is linked in the description, as well as the link to the Califano files and how to find the specific pages I cited. If you want more space history, hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time. I've been Erin, and this has been Spaceflight Histories.